The Angels stink, but we did get a juicy little tidbit from Angels owner Artie Moreno recently saying that he wants to compete next year and he expects the payroll to increase. Now, I'll say this, and Angels fans, you know this very well, simply signing free agents isn't going to bring you to the promised land. Just ask Anthony Rendon, Albert Pujols, Josh Hamilton, Justin Upton, and many more. But you have to have a solid infrastructure. You need to have the right coaches, the right approach to player development, the right approach to working with the analytics, and like the old saying goes, success or failure always trickles down from the top, and we're looking at you, Artie Moreno. Now, with that said, let's just imagine Artie Moreno and the gang has all of that figured out, and they have a good enough core in which some offseason additions can turn them into a contender. So, in this video, I'm going to go through my ideas on what I think would help the Angels get back to relevancy. Let's get to it. Let's start off with some good things the Angels do have, and that's a few core young players. Zach Neto had a solid rookie season this year, hitting 23 home runs with a 114 WRC+, while playing good defense at shortstop. He's only just about to turn 24 years old, so I expect him to get even better next year. There's also Logan O'Hoppe. Remember they got him back a couple of years ago in the Brandon Marsh trade with the Phillies. He did miss a lot of time in 2023 due to shoulder surgery in his non-throwing arm, so this year he was just getting back into the swing of things. Overall, not much with the bat, right around a league average 101 WRC+ and 20 home runs, and he could use a bit of improvement behind the plate, right around league average when it comes to most of the numbers. The pop time, though, does need to be improved. He was in the bottom 10% here, but Logan O'Hoppe, I do expect him to take another step forward next year after being another year removed from getting that shoulder surgery. There's also Nolan Schanuel, who they drafted in the first round back in 2023, and then he proceeded to make his Major League debut that same season. My goodness. But in his first full year in the major leagues this year, he did okay, posting a 104 WRC+ with a 706 OPS, but that did include a solid 343 on base percentage. Now, when I think of Nolan Schanuel, I think Freddie Freeman light in a way. You know, a good disciplined hitter, makes a good amount of contact, probably doesn't have as much power as Freddie Freeman, at least as of right now, but I think Nolan Schanuel has a bright future. Speaking of core players, let's talk Mike Trout. This man at one point was breaking the game of baseball, but over the last 4 years, he's averaged under 70 games a season because of a laundry list of injuries. I think the best thing to do with Trout is to move him to the DH spot. To be honest, even if he was fully healthy and playing him out in the field, he's not that same defender like he was in his 20s. Still solid, but not that diabolical center fielder that we saw making highlight plays left and right. Now, I think to get the most value out of Mike Trout, I think you need to get him off his legs a bit more, have him focus on the bat. That's where the true value lies with Mike Trout at this point in his career. Hey, we saw what Shohei Ohtani this year could do at the DH spot when he focused just on the bat. Now, I'm not saying Mike Trout's going to steal 50 bases, but he hit 45 home runs back in 2019. Why couldn't Mike Trout hit 50 homers as a DH? So now that we have that figured out with Trout, I think the Angels are going to have to add another bat to this lineup, and one that can play in the outfield. So, as of right now, they have Taylor Ward out in left, along with a couple other guys that I think could be a good platoon in center field. Mickey Moniak hits righties well, while Joe Adell hits lefties well. Both are pretty quick out in the field, so I think that could be a decent platoon. If not, maybe you could go towards someone like Harrison Bader, who's excellent defensively out in center field. Not much with the bat, but he's going to give you a great glove. He's good in the clubhouse as well. That leaves right field. Now, we could start off here with Juan Soto. Let's start off with the blockbuster. I just don't think he would go to the Angels. I think he's going to go back to the Yankees, maybe to the Mets. I just don't see the Angels landing Juan Soto unless they offered him like $800 million. Who knows? Maybe Artie Moreno would be game for that. But I don't expect Juan Soto to go to the Angels. Let's talk about a couple other guys. Those two options would be Anthony Santander or Teoscar Hernandez. Either I think would bring a lot to the Angels. Now, with Santander, he's a switch hitter, more lefty over righty, hit over 40 home runs this year. And as for Teoscar, he was very productive for the crosstown rival Dodgers, hitting 33 home runs and a 134 WRC+. But if I were to lean one way, I'd probably lean towards Santander. He's a much more disciplined hitter than Teoscar, as his strikeout percentage is about 10% less. Now, Teoscar would give you some speed in the lineup, which I think the Angels could use, but I would lean more towards the plate discipline of Santander. I think that would be better for the lineup. Now let's talk about a source sore subject among Angels fans, Anthony Rendon, arguably one of the worst free agent signings of all time, if not the worst free agent signing of all time. He's on a 7-year, $245 million deal with 2 years, just under $80 million left. I'm just going to say it. I think they need to cut the guy or eat the contract and trade him, eat the money and move on, because it's been a disaster. And they've already said he's not guaranteed a roster spot for next year. He's averaged around 50 games per year in this contract so far. He's not even producing in those games, and he's gotten into a couple of off-the-field issues when he scrapped with a fan in Oakland in the crowd, and he basically said on a podcast not too long ago that the season was too long, which suggested that his heart's not really into it. I think at this point, from an economical point of view, he's only hurting the team because of the lack of production, and he's preventing other players that could be much more productive. Now, will the Angels do this? I don't know. Not sure if Moreno would be able to swallow his pride and make a move like this, but that's what I would do. I think it makes more sense to pay him to not be on the team and let other guys get a chance. Now, as for other options at third base, you could go internally with a guy like Luis Rengifo, who was hitting well this year before he had to get wrist surgery, or you could go outside the organization. Maybe a guy like Alex Bregman, division rival for many years. He's been winning a lot of games over the last several years with the Astros, winning a couple of championships along the way, 7 straight American League Championship Series at one point. But Alex Bregman definitely, I think, could help improve the team, bring a winning attitude to the Angels. Maybe a guy like Eugenio Suarez, he hits for a lot of power, 30 home runs this year. Or maybe you could take a flyer on a guy like Yoan Moncada. I expect the White Sox to not exercise the club option on him. He's been having a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, but he's still under 30 years old. I still see a high ceiling player here. Maybe you could sign him to a 1-year deal, and maybe you can try and get a lot out of him for this coming year. What I would do, though, is put Rengifo at third base and then fast track the Angels' #1 pick from the draft this year, Christian Moore. This guy was lighting it up at Tennessee, and he was already putting up ridiculous numbers in the minor leagues this year. 101 ABs, hitting .347, a .400 on base, a .984 OPS overall. This guy is going to be an absolute monster. This guy needs to be the second baseman sooner rather than later. Now for the last area to address, the pitching. Point blank, the pitching was terrible this year. They ranked 29th overall between the starting pitching and the bullpen. Unfortunately, there's not many options as of right now that can step up and lead the rotation. They do have some younger guys, including Reed Detmers, who they took back in the 2020 draft. Now, Detmers is a guy who I think has a lot of upside, but personally, I think he needs to be more of a middle to back end rotation kind of a guy at this point. Take the pressure off him, switch up the game plan a little bit, and let him figure it out. The big thing he needs to figure out is the curveball and the slider. Both were good pitches for him in the past, but this year, those two pitches got clobbered. I think this offseason, he's got to work on those pitches, tighten them up a little bit, and don't forget, they got a couple other decent options as well. They got Jose Soriano and Patrick Sandoval. Jose Soriano was pitching pretty well this year for the Angels, got some arm fatigue down the stretch, got an MRI, came back clean, so he should be good to go for next year. And then Patrick Sandoval ended up getting surgery on his elbow. Not Tommy John, he got UCL surgery. Now, this year, over 16 starts, the ERA didn't look all that great. ERA at a 5.08, but the FIP was at a 3.87, so Patrick Sandoval should be ready for spring training. Either way, Sandoval, you know you can count on him in the middle of the rotation. As for some other Major League ready guys, they got Caden Danner, their top pitching prospect, who did have a cup of coffee with the Angels this year. He got hit hard in a couple of outings, but did show some pretty good things along the way. He's got some pretty good stuff. You got Samuel Aldeguer, who they got back with George Claassen in the Carlos Estevez trade with the Phillies. He showed some good things this year. There's also Jack Economix. He had 11 starts for the Angels this year. He was pretty decent. They got a couple of depth guys like Griffin Canning, Jose Suarez, and then don't forget about Tyler Anderson. He had a pretty good bounce back year this year, so they have some options for next year. Overall, though, I think they need to add a legit ace to the top of the rotation. I know Artie Moreno has been opposed to spending big money on pitching in the past, besides Garrett Cole a few years back, but he's going to have to pony up the money here for an ace, considering they don't have a lot in their farm system to trade, and they don't really have anyone that can grab that brass ring at the moment. The top two options are Corbin Burns and Max Fried, and funny enough, both of them are originally from California. Now, with Corbin Burns, I would say he's the more preferable option, considering he's been been healthier than Fried over the last couple of years, who did miss a lot of time back in 2023, while Burns is a workhorse year after year. Now, with Burns, I would say that he might not want to go to the Angels because he has stated that he wants to go somewhere with a bright outlook, while the Angels farm system ranks dead last on Baseball America. So it might be a tough sell. However, money does talk, so maybe we could see something happen. Like I said earlier, they do have some young Major League ready players, so maybe they can sell him on going to the Angels. As for Max Fried, now remember, Max Fried won the World Series with the Braves back in 2021, and who was the third base coach for the Braves in 2021? Ron Washington, the current manager for the Angels. I think it could also make some sense to go after another free agent starter in the next tier down, someone like Jack Flaherty, who's also a California guy, having a great year with the Tigers and the Dodgers this year. You got other guys like Sean Manaea, who's really stepped up this year, probably going to opt out of that deal with the Mets. There's also Luis Severino, who's on a one-year deal. You got Yusei Kikuchi, who pitched well with the Blue Jays and the Astros this year. Someone like Nick Pivetta could make some sense. Maybe even someone like Shane Bieber, who had to get Tommy John. He'll probably be back this year. You can maybe do a one-year flyer on someone like him. He's been an ace of the staff before. I think that could be a huge pickup for the Angels if he was healthy. And someone like Walker Buehler on the crosstown rival Dodgers, who's had his ups and downs this year. He's had his injuries over the last couple of years. He looked okay towards the end of the season, but hey, he's already in LA. Wouldn't be too far away, so maybe Walker Buehler could take a one-year deal with the Angels. As for the bullpen, you got some other options that were pretty good down the stretch. You got Brock Burke. You got some younger guys like Ben Joyce, who throws like 300 miles an hour. You got Ryan Zephyrhan, someone like Hans Kraus. You got Jose Quijada, Kenny Rosenberg. So I think the bullpen, they got some arms in here. I say just try and figure out the bullpen for next year. Maybe add a couple of guys on the free agent market as well. And also, don't forget about Robert Stevenson. Remember, they signed him to a 3-year deal. Had to get Tommy John at the beginning of this year, but he should be back at some point next year. So those are my ideas for the Angels. Let me know your ideas down below in the comments. What do you think they need to do? Do you think the Angels are completely hopeless? Do you think they can turn things around and compete next year? Let me know down below in the comments. But everyone, that's all I got for right now. If you can on the way out, hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.